All right. So we're starting here today with the surprise that we had for you. It's ta-da! Earl Watson. Welcome, Earl. How are you?
Thank, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here with us today. Earl, as you know, Say What is all about sharing the stories that really matter. So we're thrilled to have you here to tell your story. Um, so please, Earl, tell us a little bit about yourself from, your upbringing to now entrepreneur passing through the MBA.
Yeah, I have a unique story. My mom is first generation Mexican American. Her parents are from Mexico. They came to Texas and, from Juarez and eventually had her in Austin. And, that strong Latino foundation is my upbringing and foundation as far as how I was raised. And my dad is African American, so I grew up in an all black neighborhood, which where I learned how to hoop, play basketball, and eventually go to UCLA, graduate, and play in the NBA for 10 plus years, 13 as a player, 3.5 as a coach. So 17 years total in the NBA. And here I am now on Say What and delivering our
Yay!
narrative on what it's like to be, I like to call it understanding trials and tribulations and persevering through life.
Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, we're thrilled to have you. I'm interested, before going pro, what are some of the jobs you had?
Oh, I mean, my job has been basketball since the second grade. My mom has had a number of jobs from, her time and with her family growing up in the fields of Texas, being a migrant worker. I think they were picking, in the fields picking cotton at that time. And then eventually, as she got older, working in factories. And when I was in high school, I actually used to help my mother clean commercial buildings, and we would service commercial buildings on Friday nights in order for me to have enough money to play basketball and eventually have basketball shoes. So it was always a servant's job. We didn't come from a lot of strong financial background. We came from very minimum. But one thing my mom always raised us with was the Latino, I call it the Latino way, which is always, God is always first. But outside of that, it's family, food, and music. And, that kind of kept us together and persevered through all these challenging times of finances and, just losing loved ones. And that's kind of how we persevered. And my mom taught us how to live.
I love that. Can you share with us a story that you remember very well from your childhood, maybe in your family?
Yeah, we had a lot of cool stories. Growing up being, I call it Blaxican, I never really knew the difference. I just assumed that everyone was raised and lived the same way I lived until it was pointed out to me how different and unique my family was. My mom didn't graduate from high school. Like I said, her parents were undocumented immigrants that came from Mexico to the United States. And my mom started working at an early age. So hard work has always been implemented in our lives. My mother also was my one and only school tutor, so that the knowledge was there, but she had to teach herself how to write, how to spell, how to count, how to multiply and divide. And she taught herself so many amazing ways that she raised me to graduate eventually from the #1 public university in the world is UCLA. And it's because of my mom and her drive that she did that. My father and mother's been together for 50 years. They're still together, which is awesome. And I think some of the most interesting times is that my grandmother, my mom's mother, she didn't know English and I knew very little Spanish. So she would watch us throughout the summer, throughout the day, me and my younger sister. But I know how to say like, abuelita, comida, comida. And she'd be like, oh, vente, vente, and she'd cook. So, all I needed was food and a basketball, and I was good to go outside till like 1 in the morning. And it was the easiest thing for me to do. And my mom used to always send us, remember I grew up in a black neighborhood, so my mom would always send us to the bus stops with burritos wrapped in foil with chorizo, potatoes, and beans. So I was
Yum.
always the cool little kid at the bus stop with the different food and the best food in the whole neighborhood.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So touching a little bit back on those points, we know you had a successful career both as a player and a coach at the NBA, but you just recently graduated from UCLA after returning to finish your degree. So what pushed you back? to go? What pushed you? I mean, what pushed you to go back and finish that?
Yeah, I thought that was really important. My dad was one of the first African Americans to integrate the U.S. Army in 1954 as a drill sergeant. So discipline was always there. And then my mom just telling me the stories of her dad, her father, and how he came over for an opportunity of education and a better life for his family, who I never had a chance to meet because he passed away and my mom was at the age of 19. Just hearing his perseverance and his dream, I kind of feel like I owe that part of going back and graduating to my grandfather, whose name was Jesus, who I never met. But my mom talked so highly of him and implemented him throughout our entire lives. I feel like I've always known him and I could see the residue of his perseverance through my mother. And so after I played in the NBA for a while, 13 years, coaching the NBA, I feel like it was only right to go back and finish what I started. So it was something that I could always say, you know, my mom is first generation, that would make me second generation. And, you know, we can accomplish anything with support and opportunity. And that's the only thing that really stops minorities from actually achieving it, is the opportunity. You know, you give us an opportunity and we have to take advantage of that, because it can influence so many more people who look like us or have our background story to even go further than the things we've done.
Yeah, I agree. And in that sense, and to wrapping up the interview, I would like to ask you, if you could go back in time and say something to your young self, and this is a message for young kids out here too, what would it be? What would be your one message?
Well, one message is interesting. This is pretty deep. This is kind of transparent. For me, I grew up in the hood, so I grew up around everything. I was not sheltered to anything in the trials and tribulations of life or in the inner city. I grew up in, you know, a gang banging neighborhood. I went to public schools my entire life. My mom always dressed me in Dickies with a white tee, so I kind of grew up that way. It's all we could afford. And if I could talk to my younger self, who was suspended 13 times in high school, expelled once, I would tell my younger self that you have two choices in life. You have a choice to find the light, or you have a choice to emotionally concede to being afraid, which is the darkness. Always choose the light. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to fight. You don't have to survive. You have to understand that if you keep in the light and you stay positive, no matter how hard you want to change a situation or you want to gain respect, you cannot control any other one's emotions or perspective on yourself. Stay in the light, avoid the drama, avoid the haters, and stay positive and work at your passion. Because our story is written if we stay in a positive space. The moment we go into the darkness of negativity and try to manipulate situations or show how tough we are or just express ourselves through emotional immaturity, is the moment that our amazing story being written is going to change to being shifty. So to everyone who comes from situations like me, I had two brothers murdered. I understand what it's like. I had best friends in middle school murdered, best friends in high school murdered. I understand what it's like to go to school and not have any money, not having money for lunch. And I grew up in the Midwest. I also understand what it's like to come home and not have any heat. And you have to open up the oven for heat and no cable, and the same clothes just over and over again, whether you turn them inside out or you try to rotate them every 2 or 3 days. I understand all of that. What my mom always told me was this, is if you believe in God and you have full faith and you continue to pray and you work at what you love, the opportunity is going to come. But even if you do all of that and you have so much anger and survival tactics built up inside of you, when that opportunity comes, you're going to be emotionally torn and you're going to lose your opportunity. And I almost lost my opportunity a lot of times. And so I'm very grateful to be where I am today. I'm very grateful to share my story, because if I can detour kids who might not get those chances like me to do all the things the right way or the best way you can, because nothing is perfect, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, even a masterpiece has imperfections. We have to understand that. Do things the best you can, stay in the light no matter how much it hurt. I promise you, when you learn how to live through, you know, testing times, if you learn how to live through those times with a positive attitude, you're going to have so many opportunities that we are going to push our narrative, which we must control as Latino people. We're going to push that so far forward that we're going to influence a group of young, influential political leaders, business owners, men and women, to just take over anything we choose to take over in a positive way of competition. And we know we're going to push the same things I mentioned earlier, right? Family, food, music. So it's all love and
Yay.
it's all community. So we have to understand that and just stay positive. In the darkest times and my most challenging moments when I thought it was over is when I found my biggest opportunities. So to me, you have to understand the trends of being challenged mentally and emotionally.
I love it. Stay in the light. Stay in the light. My last question to you, Earl. I would love for you to share, for us all to understand the power of just one person, how we as people can change the course of things. I would love if you would share how you got drawn to basketball for real. Who was this one person aside from your family that made you take basketball seriously?
Well, basketball was always my emotional escape for me to deal with all of my pains and traumatic experiences as a kid. So when I would put on the jersey, I felt like everything that happened in my life didn't exist for the next 40 minutes on the court. I could be someone else. It was like putting on a cape and jumping into a play on the stage, right? You just turn into a different character. And so I started playing at an early age, second grade, and even just creating and mimicking the idea of me playing in the NBA one day was always in my mind and verbally coming out of my mouth. And it wasn't until I got into high school that I kept getting suspended. And I had a guidance counselor pull me out of a principal's office and sit me into her office. And I was in the 10th grade at this time. And I was going through so many emotional things in my life, in school and out of school, that I really didn't know if I was possible past 18. Like, cause I wasn't seeing a lot of friends living. So I was like, this is just, it is what it is. I was almost hopeless. And she grabbed me and she told me, her name was Ruth Goheen. And she told me that, she told me how special I was. And I'm looking at her like, yo, I never had anyone outside of my family my family tell me this because I had this amazing gift in sport. But for someone who had a non-attachment to me to tell me this really changed my life. And she was like, it's going to be my goal to get you academically prepared to pass your ACT and everything you need from the clearinghouse to get a basketball scholarship and to get out of here and do something amazing through sports and academics. And at that point, I haven't known anyone who's done that. And here I am in the middle of the country in Kansas City, in one of the most poorest counties in the country still to this day, where you can buy a house in downtown KCK today for $20,000 or less, thinking this is only in the movies, lady, like it don't really happen here. But she stayed with me and she would make me volunteer my time in high school to delivering groceries and going to the grocery store and getting groceries for the battered women's shelter, going to visit the Ronald McDonald House, reading the kids, and doing community service through the school. And here I am thinking, these are not kids that I hang with. Like, these kids are like completely different from me, but she made me do it. And that kind of stuck with me throughout my life. And if it wasn't for her, I know I don't exist here right now. So if you are an educator and you are a teacher and you see opportunity, or you see anyone who you believe or who you don't believe, no matter what their school record is of like, suspensions or not, I think it's important for us to just emotionally connect to children and tell them they are possible, no matter how good or bad you think they are, because we don't know, we don't control opportunity, but we control perspective as adults because we've lived a long life than the younger people. And we have to let them know that they are possible, no matter how hard it is or how much trouble you get into, that you are still possible. Don't give up, because like me, it could change like that. Like my grandfather who came over here undocumented, who didn't know English, who had my mother, he didn't know his grandkid would be an NBA player and a multi-millionaire. It can happen like that. So we don't have to concede to the darkness. We can still do amazing things in the light and build opportunities and tell our narrative, because the more we succeed and tell people, the more people who don't look like us understand who we are outside of television scripted scenes, and want to give more people like us opportunity, or want to work with people like us to build community wealth and opportunity for others. So I think that's very important. I think for our community, it's no time better than now than to tell our narratives and create opportunities for the future.
I agree. I agree. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you, everyone that is listening. And that's it, and watching us. And that's it for today. All right. Thank you, Earl.
Thank you.